Hello and welcome for another episode of Science Fiction Remnant. Today we have a really good show. Um, we had so this is long overdue, basically. Um, I had been talking to this podcast that we wanted to do an episode with, and due to conflicts in scheduling, we couldn't do it earlier. But today is happening, and we're discussing the movie RoboCop. Today we have with us one of the coolest podcast names that I ever heard. The podcast that wouldn't die. Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Hello.
Awesome. I am so excited. We're going to get talking about RoboCop. So you gave me an excuse to put this movie in. And apparently, I say an excuse, but I guess everybody else loved it. But
it's a
Robert,
classic.
Hey, Robert, let's get some names so people know who's talking.
go ahead. So my name is Robert, and you know me from season one. And go ahead and our host, Ray.
I'm Ray from Australia. Joined the crew for season 2. Love the show, so I thought I'd better be part of it.
And glad you came in. I'm so glad you came in. And go ahead, the podcast I wouldn't die. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell our audience where they can find you and what your podcast is all about.
Hey, I'm Aaron. I'm one half of the brother sister team from the podcast that wouldn't die. And I'm going to shoot it over to Kevin because only he knows where we are.
This is Kevin. I'm one of the co-hosts of the podcast that wouldn't die. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're also on Twitter and Facebook, anywhere the finer podcasts are available.
But not SoundCloud. And we don't know what that's about.
And I'm gonna pause right here because I gotta say this to Ray, and Ray is gonna laugh.
Probably.
Ray,
I do that a lot.
are you ready, Ray?
Okay, I'm ready.
I have the video going, but I forgot to press play on audition.
Womp, 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 womp.
Take 2.
Come on, Ray. Come on.
You need a checklist, dude. Do you need me to write you a checklist?
Do you want Kevin to text you so you're ready?
And
Throw on your robe.
You know, guys, he should know this because he is a pilot. They have a checklist. They have to.
Maybe this is his rebellion. I'm not piloting. I don't need a checklist.
I don't need a damn checklist.
But he
I
is
forgot
the
to
pilot.
lower the landing gear.
He's the pilot of the Starship Science Fiction Remnant, so you better fucking get a checklist.
Okay.
Better now than later.
Yes, it's a good thing that I checked.
Yes. Second verse, same as the first.
But at least you guys come up on the recording.
Good.
What happened the last time was that the sound from you guys wasn't coming up. That's what happened in Logan's Run. Oh man, I was so upset. I spent hours trying to fix that recording. Okay, here we go for second try. Let's see. Hello and welcome to Science Fiction Remnant Season 2. Today we're talking about RoboCop, and we're bringing one of the coolest podcast names that I have seen. The podcast that wouldn't die. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Let's go ahead and go and introduce yourself to the audience. Let's start with Ray.
G'day, mates. I'm Ray from Australia. Joined Science Fiction Remnant because I love the show so much, so I thought I'd better join. And I'm here for season 2.
And we are so glad that you are in with us because you're and you guys are familiar by now with the previous episodes, how we have the different segments, and one of my favorite segments, and I hope it would be yours too, is the science and science fiction. So thank you for coming back, and thank you for your ideas. And go ahead, the podcast that wouldn't die. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell them what is the show about and where they can find you.
Hey, I'm Aaron, part of the brother sister team from the podcast that wouldn't die. So we're all about horror and science fiction. Mostly horror, but we throw in a little science fiction for variety. and mostly Kevin's classics, but every time, so often I'll throw in a whammy, like we just did Flesh for Frankenstein. Kevin's not going to long recover from that. But now I'm going to throw it to Kevin.
Hey, this is Kevin, one of the co-hosts of the podcast that wouldn't die. Guilty pleasures and forgotten classics is what I say. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Anywhere the finer podcasts are available.
Yeah. And
Hey, I have a question for you guys. Do you just do movies?
Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll relate a book back. If there's a book first and I've read it, I will force Kevin to listen to me explain why the book was better.
And then I'll edit that out.
He's also the editor, so he's constantly controlling our words. I totally remember listening. I'm like, didn't I say something else about that point? It's gone forever.
Gone. Sometimes inappropriate things are edited out as well. Thank you, Aaron.
Trying to avoid lawsuits, I guess.
Well, you can feel comfortable because we don't have we don't have any we're published as a you can say whatever you want. Although I might not say as many bad words as I might want to say, but feel free.
Aaron will do that for you. So
I'll
good.
do it anyway, because apparently ours is G-rated. So Kevin just said, that's 7 times you've said the F word now. I got to go back and edit all that out.
It's not G-rated. It's just not NC-17.
Well, PG, you're allowed 1, so you can leave 1 in.
Awesome. So I'm going to go into our first segment.
Define science fiction remnant.
And what we do in this segment is basically if you had someone that loves sci-fi like we do, and you think they might enjoy this podcast, how would you describe that the podcast to them? And we usually collect this in Twitter. So if you want to be featured in one of the episodes, go ahead and send us a tweet and tell us how you would describe us to someone that have not heard us and you think they might like it because they love sci-fi. For this segment, I have Bree, ReachelKB, and she says the following: an in-depth and intelligent conversation about movies between two good friends who want others to enjoy a show and talk about it together. What do you think about that, Ray? I don't know if you heard that one before. It was actually posted.
I don't think I caught that one. I was watching that thread when you were asking for how would you describe science fiction remnant, but no, that one's a new one on me. I must have missed that.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
And I don't know if you guys want to join in. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to, throw something, some sort of description, it's okay. If not, we can move on.
A description of your podcast?
Yes.
Well, I know it's dynamite. How about that?
There you go. It's dynamite. And if you're a science fiction fan, you certainly don't want to miss out.
You can use that in promotional materials if you want.
You're
good enough to guest on, hey?
That's right.
And that's going to be there forever because it's said by the podcast that wouldn't die.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next segment. We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Sci-Fi.
And you guys should be familiar by now. Here we talked about the hashtag This is Sci-Fi. So the whole idea, as I speak about this in every episode, is the fact that we want to get every sci-fi fan or creator together, not necessarily just podcasters, writers, movie makers, in fans, and the idea is that it would be great for the fans to be able to have a direct connection to the creators, and this is why I thought the idea of having the This Is Sci-Fi hashtag would be so great. We also have a Discord for those who use Discord, where we can talk about sci-fi topics as well. And Ray, if you can say a little, I'm not sure if you're really into the thread like we spoke before. I'm in there every day. What is your thought, and how what do you think? What you love the most about that hashtag, and why and the idea behind what we are trying to do for sci-fi.
We were actually discussing something similar to this before we started recording the podcast, about how you get echo chambers on Twitter and people coming together with all the same ideas. We were talking about the sort of negative echo chambery side of things and the self-justification, but there's column A and there's column B, and of course column A is the positive side of it, which is bringing people together that are interested in the same things. And it's always been the same problem. I mean, I grew up pre-internet. Yeah, I'm ancient. And we didn't have that opportunity to just jump on a computer and find people who liked the same things. You had to find them at school, face to face, and you're all like sort of, oh, do I tell people that I like science fiction because they might think I'm strange or an idiot or something? And so you might stay quiet and be the loner in the corner who's keen on science fiction but doesn't have anybody to talk to about it. But now we have things like Twitter, and I'm actually a late arrival on Twitter because I was warned off it by a lot of people saying that there was a lot of toxicity and nasty people and things like that. And I have bumped into a few of those, but overwhelmingly, my experience on Twitter has been exceedingly positive. As people would know by now, I'm one of the influencers in the Elite Army, which is the fandom for the movie Alita Battle Angel and the source manga Gumu from Japan. And I've met so many people from all around the world thanks to that fandom, and most of them through Twitter. And now that I've got into the This Is Sci-Fi hashtag and the discussion groups there, I'm meeting a whole bunch more people with a wider range of science fiction interests. And the beautiful thing about it is that there's all these podcasts that I never knew about. And in fact, just while you were doing introductions there, you must have seen me sort of looking down. I had my phone out. I was putting the podcast that wouldn't die into my podcast list. So now I can go and listen to you guys, and you find out all the stuff that you're sort of interested in. And it's really great to see different ways of presenting the information, because I'm a science communicator. So I'm always interested to see how people communicate their passions and communicate their interest in science fiction. And being a science fiction nut from way back, I can see all these sort of threads coming together of how people are really enjoying their science fiction. And through that, I discover so much more science fiction than I knew about before. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It's like having a complete army of people that are interested in what you're interested in right there at your beck and call to give you all sorts of suggestions and hints and tips and give you their take on things. And it's really, really fun. That's what I like about it.
One of my favorite things is the fact that, typically before, and I don't know if it's just my personal experience, but you find a different fandoms. So you go into a topic and, sci-fi, and you find, all the Star Wars, all the Star Trek, and this is sci-fi hashtag. It has been my experience that you get all these fandoms together. And not only that, but you might be talking about something in particular, and all of a sudden someone that likes what you do recommends something that you never heard of, and you're like, whoa, how did I miss that? And then you watch it, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So this is my personal experience with the hashtag, and why I think it's so important, if you're a sci-fi creator or a sci-fi fan, to follow it. Have you guys, this question is for the podcast that wouldn't die. Have you guys have the opportunity to look at some of the threads within the This Is Sci-Fi hashtag?
I haven't seen the hashtag as of yet, but I have to tell you, you guys are doing a heck of a sell job. So I'm definitely going to have to check it out now, because it is true. there's the value, I guess, of Twitter on some level is that you can kind of meet people who have similar interests and then discover new things that you might not otherwise have been exposed to. So that's absolutely a great opportunity.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, because people will recommend movies to us. Unfortunately, most of the ones that have been recommended, I've been pretty sour on.
It's
But
hit or
one
miss.
day they will recommend an unknown gem to me.
Nice. Yeah, I found a couple, and I am so glad how it is. I know at the beginning it was very slow, but right now, I mean, I think Ray spoke about this in that last episode, and how the last time he was in there, he had a hard time trying to follow.
Yeah, there's so much going on in that thread. If you take your eye off it for like a day or so, there's like 100 posts in there. You're like, oh crap, you've got to try and catch up on all of this.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next segment.
Shout out.
And this segment usually is by Giancarlos, who he actually told me to let you guys know he apologized. He could not make it for this episode. But basically, on this segment, what we talk about is, people they have, they have show up some interest in our show and has helped us in Twitter, either with retweets or, just engaging in the conversation, the sci-fi conversation. And in this segment, for this episode, I would like to shout out MaliceAfterMidnight at After Malice in Twitter. They are amazing, and it seemed like they are very engaging in the conversation. Whenever they have, those typical follows, which, by the way, I discover a lot of, new podcasts via those. So I really appreciate she's always recommending us as well. So I just want to extend a thank you for everything that they do so far for us on Twitter. You don't have anything, Ray? I can move on to the next up.
No, I don't have anything for
Okay.
that one. I usually rely on Giancarlo to nail that one.
Yeah, I figure, and and I extend it to you guys too. The podcast that wouldn't die. If you want to shout out someone in particular,
I mean, there are a number of people on Twitter who are always really good about, follow Friday, hashtag follow Friday or whatever. Or if somebody's like looking for podcast recommendations, that will put us out there. So I always appreciate Leo Allen is particularly good about that. He does a voluntary input podcast. He's really good. I mean, he is really engaged. He's always responding to people's work. He's always trying to push other people's podcasts. And we've been on voluntary input as well. So he's excellent. If you don't follow him, you should definitely do so.
Was it voluntary or did he force you?
Our input was definitely voluntary in this case.
Oh, good.
Nice. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next topic.
The Outer Remnant.
And the Outer Remnant, basically what we do is, for all of you that are hearing our voices, if you're not watching the video, and you may want to hear more of us. This is a segment where we give you, other venues that you can go and reach out where we can, when you can hear us talk, maybe not necessarily about the same topic, but you can get more of us somewhere else. So let me start with Ray.
I'm Robert's go-to for this one because I'm one of the hosts of the Elite Army Radio Chaos live stream, which happens every Saturday afternoon Eastern US time. But it's a global fandom, so we have people from Europe, Australia, America. Not many from Central Asia because it's the middle of the night there for them. But when you're live streaming around the world, as we do. And I know that sounds like a little bit pompous, but it's just a case of, when you've got fans across the world, you got to try and find a time zone where most of the people who are keen to participate are actually awake. So I'm up at 7 in the morning on a Sunday morning to host the live stream. So that one's a little bit harsh for me, but it's Saturday afternoon in the US, and it's late Saturday night in Europe. So we sort of do our best to get everybody together. So this week we had we're covering chapter by chapter the source material for the movie Alita Battle Angel, which is a manga called Gumu. That's the Japanese name for it. In English, it was renamed Battle Angel Alita. It's pure cyberpunk, futuristic cyberpunk, lots of good fun. And the writer, artist, Yukito Kishiro, he started it in the 90s, and it's still going. To this day. He's had a couple of breaks in there, but he's on his third series now, following this story. It's epic and it's fantastic, and I highly recommend it to everybody. So if you're in Europe or Asia, it's Gumu. If you're in sort of in English-speaking Western countries, it's Battle Angel Alita. But it is a fantastic story, and I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
And so we were covering a chapter in the second volume of that this week. So we were going through page by page, talking about the panels. And this particular chapter had a lot of source scenes and comment dialogue that was actually in the movie. So it was a particularly good one.
Nice. And, the podcast that wouldn't die. If you guys don't listen, you should listen now. I am a fan. I am a subscriber. I just got Max to listen to. Well, he hasn't listened to it yet, but if you haven't listened, you should. Now, I want to extend this invitation to you guys. For those of our fans that listen to you, that want to get more of you, have you ever appeared in another podcast that they can go find more of you?
Absolutely. We were on the Uncut Gems podcast where we were talking about the immortal classic Con Air, which it's hilarious. It is a great episode, so go check that one out. We were on the Stu World Order podcast in January talking about the Japanese film Battle Royale. So you can check that out. We're like on everybody's show. So thank you again for having us, by the way.
And it's definitely a pressure, and I would have to apologize because it took us so long to get you in here, but I'm so excited we're finally doing it today. So thank you so much for coming in.
Con Air must be almost as popular as Logan's Run, because I've seen like 4 different podcasts do Logan's Run, including ours, recently.
We've done it too.
And, well, there you go. And I think the Movie Seller. I don't know if you guys have heard that podcast, but I particularly like those fellas. They're out of is it Michigan? I think. I may be incorrect there, but they do movies that appeared on VHS. They're particularly keen on VHS.
That's fun.
And in fact, when they did, we did a thing with them where we raised lots of money for their charity, which is the Juvenile Diabetes Association of America. But
cool.
They reviewed Alita Battle Angel for us, and they actually dubbed it onto VHS to watch it. So that's how.
That's commitment.
It is serious commitment. And they buy up old VHS machines and old CRTs so that they can.
I want to
really
know
get into
now,
it.
is there a Betamax podcast out there that will only review movies that were on Betamax?
That's a bit hard. They do have an episode all about the VHS Betamax war, which was particularly interesting because I lived through that. But they did the 12 Days of Cagemas.
Oh, dynamite!
No.
And Con Air
I
was one of those. So highly worth checking out.
Nice. Okay, so let's get into the topic of this episode, RoboCop from 1987. Ray, do you usually read the synopsis?
Yeah, I've got it here ready to roll.
Okay. So
one of my 300 tabs that I have open. It's a bit like that with Google Foo these days. Okay, so we're talking about the 1987 version of RoboCop, not the remake, which I have watched, and I thought that they completely went off the rails with that whole train through the center of the earth thing. Science be damned, but this is the original, and I consider the best. So I can't really do, because I'm Aussie, I can't really do that bottle of scotch and 3 packs of cigarettes a day voiceover go, in the future, that whole thing. So you just have to put up with my Aussie accent. But here we go. In near future dystopia, Detroit is on the brink of societal and financial collapse. Overwhelmed by crime and dwindling resources, the city grants the mega corporation Omni Consumer Products, otherwise known as OCP, control over the Detroit police force. OCP Senior President Dick Jones demonstrates ED 209. By the way, do you guys know what ED stands for?
Enforcement droid.
Yes, thank you. Very well done. So enforcement droid number 209. I wonder what happened to the other 208.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
A law enforcement droid designs to supplement the police. ED-209 malfunctions in the demonstration for the executives and brutally kills one of the executives, allowing ambitious junior executive Bob Morton to introduce the chairman, the old man in inverted commas, to his own project, RoboCop. Meanwhile, Officer Alex Murphy is transferred to the Metro West precinct. Now, you've got to remember that OCP is running the police, so they've actually had him transferred into a danger zone. Bastards. Murphy and his new partner, Ann Lewis, pursue notorious criminal Clarence Bodica and his gang, Emil Antonowski, Leon Nash, Joe Cox, and Steve Min. The gang ambushes and tortures Murphy until Bodica fatally shoots him. Morton has Murphy's corpse converted into RoboCop, a powerful and heavily armored cyborg with no memory of his former life. RoboCop is programmed with 3 prime directives: serve the public, trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. A 4th prime directive, Directive 4, is classified. RoboCop is assigned to Metro West and hailed by the media for his brutally efficient campaign against crime. Lewis suspects he is Murphy, recognizing the unique way he holsters his gun and tricks Murphy. A trick Murphy learned to impress his son. During maintenance, RoboCop experiences a nightmare of Murphy's death. He leaves the station and encounters Lewis, who addresses him as Murphy. While on patrol, RoboCop arrests Emil, who recognizes Murphy's mannerisms, furthering RoboCop's recall. RoboCop then uses a police database to identify Emil's associates and review Murphy's police record. RoboCop recalls further memories while exploring Murphy's former home, his wife and son having moved away following his death. Elsewhere, Jones gets Bodica murdered to murder Morton, in revenge for Morton's attempt to usurp his position at OCP. RoboCop tracks down the Bodica gang and a shootout occurs. He brutally assaults Bodica, who confesses to working for Jones. RoboCop attempts to kill Bodica until his programming directs him to uphold the law. He attempts to arrest Jones at OCP Tower, but Directive 4, a failsafe measure to neutralize RoboCop when acting against an OCP executive, is activated. Jones admits his culpability in Morton's death and releases an ED 209 to destroy RoboCop. Although he escapes, RoboCop is assaulted by the police force on OCP's order and is badly damaged. Lewis helps RoboCop escape to an abandoned steel mill to repair himself. Angered by OCP's underfunding and short staffing, the police go on strike, and Detroit descends into chaos as riots break out through the city. That's called Monday in Detroit these days, isn't it?
So sad.
Jones frees Bodica and his remaining gang, arms them with high-powered weaponry to destroy RoboCop. Do you remember what those are called?
The Cobra Assault Cannon.
Thank you. I can see that if we were going to have a RoboCop trivia competition, you would be the winner. At the steel mill, Bodica's men are quickly eliminated, but Lewis is badly injured and RoboCop becomes trapped under steel girders. Even so, he kills Bodica by stabbing him in the throat with his data spike. RoboCop confronts Jones
what
at
we're
OC.
calling it, the data spike.
It is. It's always been called the data spike, actually. Yeah.
Nice.
RoboCop confronts Jones at OCP Tower during a board meeting, revealing the truth behind Morton's murder. Jones, in order to escape, takes the old man hostage, but is promptly fired from OCP by the old man, nullifying Directive 4 and allowing RoboCop to shoot him full of holes. The old man compliments RoboCop shooting him and asks him his name. RoboCop replies, Murphy, roll credits.
Yes. I love that line.
It was great.
I love that line.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name? Murphy. Couldn't
he have arrested Dick Jones, by the way? I don't know if it's... He doesn't really arrest people in this movie, does he? There's just kind of a carnage wherever he goes.
Well, I guess if he's got a learning AI on board, it learned that arresting people was kind of pointless. especially when OCP who run the police are bad, or at least some of them are bad. So
what is that vengeance? I wonder what that vengeance. What factor would the vengeance had on that decision when he decided to shoot? I always thought that would be a major decision factor in shooting him and not arresting him.
Well, I don't think Dick Jones caused his death directly. You know what I mean? It was Clarence Boddicker just doing his thing. You know what I'm saying? Now, Dick Jones later tries to have him killed on multiple occasions, so maybe there's some vengeance in there, so who's to say?
But even when he stops the guy robbing the liquor store, he half destroys the liquor store. Like there's more damage done to the liquor store than what the dude was actually robbing them for.
Yeah.
And then he left the guy's body like in the freezer section.
Yeah, later.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Yeah, that line at the end. But hey, he left the proprietors alive, which is probably more than the guy would have done if he just had his rampage.
That is true. That is true.
Ray, what do you think? Cyberpunk.
Oh yeah, it's completely cyberpunk. I mean, it's got a cyborg in it, so it qualifies.
The reason why I'm bringing that up is I remember when I first saw this movie for the first time. To me, my experience with this movie, it was unique for its time.
Oh, yeah.
Usually gore was reserved for horror films. And it was, I don't like horror. And when I saw this, I didn't know what to think because I love sci-fi and I love cyberpunk. And now there has the element of gore that is usually on horror films. And I'm like, I was having mixed emotions, and by the time the movie was ended, it was like the funnest ride I ever, So I think this might have paved the way for movies like Deadpool to be made. Where, I don't know. I was kind of curious to see what your experience on that was, because it was very profound for me when I watched it for the first time. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. This is sci-fi. Well, what is gore doing in here?
It is remarkably bloody.
Yeah, I didn't like it when I first saw it in the 90s, and I hadn't seen it since because I thought it was too violent. And I watch horror movies, but I don't watch, I don't like slasher or torture porn. But to me, when I saw it in the 90s, I'm like, this is too much.
Well, if you watched, your typical Sylvester Stallone movie, for example, 100 people get killed, but you don't really see any blood, remarkably. In this movie...
Chunks of meat are flying out of this dude as he's getting shot to bits.
It's a bloodbath. When he stabs him with the data spike, you literally see blood, like a bucket of blood, just splash down on RoboCop. It is bloody.
And then when he staggers back with his hand there, it's going...
What about when Murphy got his hand blown off? It was just
boom. Oh yeah, when Lewis walks in on that scene after he's been shot, it looks like a murder scene. There's blood all over the floor, like somebody just lobbed a grenade in there or something.
It is in fact a murder scene because isn't he dead?
And the fact that Bodica is like,
Yes!
Like it's a computer game. Boom, blows the guy's hand off.
Yeah.
They're complete nut, like, psychopaths.
It's that juxtaposition of kind of this playful attitude, and then he blows the guy's hand off. Boom.
He's
Crazy.
like the Joker.
He is. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was yeah, I was kind of curious about that because that's always something that I always wondered when I watched that movie, and how was the experience on everybody with those two, you know, and after, and I think if I might be wrong here, but I'm thinking, I don't think I seen a movie made in that manner prior, unless it was horror, prior to this movie. So I think, in my opinion, at least this is definitely the first one I seen that it was made that way. And I think if it wasn't for this movie, I might not really appreciate movies coming after this. Would, like, I don't know if I would have looked at Deadpool in the same way.
Well, it's like Total Recall. If you go watch Total Recall, same director, came out a year or two later, it is remarkably violent as well, where it's like arms getting chopped off.
To me, it is. I found RoboCop upsetting when I first saw it, but I don't know. Maybe it's because it was just like when they're killing him, it's just so terrible. It's just so awesome. But I don't know. You're wiping out all the Martians. It didn't bother me. I don't know why. Maybe because it's not chunks of meat flying out as each piece is being shot up. I mean,
we watch horror movies.
Yeah, we watch horror movies, but it's super gratuitous, I thought.
We watch horror movies, and this is the movie that was upsetting you.
Yes! That's the weird thing, because I think this is closer. Okay, this is my weird thing. Horror doesn't bother me because, my mind, I just kind of write it off. Something like this, where it's like, it's sci-fi, but it's like just like the dystopian future. It reminds me of war movies. War movies I find very upsetting. And so I think it starts to fall into that category where it's like the way they're killing him is kind of more realistic than if it was Freddy Krueger popping through you in the dreams. You know what I mean? I think that's where I found it more upsetting.
Do you still don't like the movie now after? Is this something just kind of like a sore thing that?
No, so I hadn't seen it. I feel like this time in the 80s, a lot of movies were really violent. Even Beverly Hills Cop was violent. There was a lot of biz going on in the late 80s. So I hadn't seen it since then. So I watched it last week. And it's quite possible that I have just become more jaded by the violence. It's still graphic.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the movie more now. Now you can see it's a good movie, but it's not my favorite. Total Recall, 1,000 times better, if you ask me.
Awesome. I was just kind of curious to see because, usually, and it happened to me too, especially, I don't know if you guys heard our episode on Barbarella for season 1.
I love Barbarella. I need to go listen to that.
If you hear that episode, I speak of how, when I watched the movie, I was a teenager, and I found it so fascinating, so shocking to me that my experience after being an adult of watching that movie was completely different than what I remember that movie to be,
right?
And how I was able to get a lot more of it than back then. So I'm always curious, and that's the reason why I always ask the question, like when someone says, I used to hate it, do you hate it now after, and I find it really interesting because you guys cover sci-fi and horror at the same time. So that's another curiosity from me.
Well, and we're confronted with kind of having to compare, at least I am, because a lot of these movies that we discuss on our show are things that I remember loving back in '82 or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then I bring it up. And I'm like, Aaron, you got to see this.
It was a classic, and you revisit it, and you're like, "What the hell was I thinking?"
There's a whole cognitive bias based on your age because as you age, your brain changes, and then the way that you experience things and think about them, plus all your wisdom that you built up over your life, changes your experience of things. So oftentimes it's not good to go back and revisit things you really enjoyed in your childhood, because they're not the same for you anymore, and it'll just ruin it. Leave the rose-colored glasses on and remember it fondly and move on, basically. But RoboCop's not one of those things, because I saw that when I was in my early 20s at the cinema, and just like Robert said, it was quite confronting, because you didn't expect that level of gore in what was supposed to be just a sci-fi property. Like, oh, it's cyberpunk. Yeah, this will be fun. Oh my God, people are getting blown to pieces all over the place. And that was part of the director's thing. What he was basically doing a parody of like police shows and sort of putting a science fiction twist on it. In fact, I think the wiki actually mentions that he came up with the idea while he was working on Blade Runner.
Right.
Yeah. And that, you said it's a funny thing you mentioned that, because some of the reasons why I wanted to watch this movie when I watched it is because of my hunger on cyberpunk, and how, we don't have that much cyberpunk, or at least back then. It was something that was emerging. I mean, we have Blade Runner. So when I saw that, it's like, oh, sci-fi, cyberpunk, I'm all in. Granted, now we have a lot more cyberpunk, but before I had hunger for it because there wasn't much around.
Right. Well, what's interesting about this movie, and I was thinking about this, another movie, Alien Nation, have kind of the similar quality, where it's like, it's the future, but it could be, a year or two in the future.
Yeah.
Wherever basically the settings are kind of contemporary, but then there's cyborgs, or there are aliens kind of plugged down in this near future situation, which is kind of interesting juxtaposition.
Well, and
it's almost like an alternate universe, because it doesn't seem like it could happen. Sorry.
No, that's me. I'm from a large family. We're used to just jumping in and shouting.
So now no one's going to say anything.
Go ahead. You were going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was going to say the first cyborg. I mean, it's so giant, but if you shrank it down a little bit, it could be like one of those Boston robotic dogs that they were putting out all the time. I mean, it walks and moves just like that. So you're right. It's not the so distant future. I mean, it's not like we're waiting for Star Trek to beam us up. This is just kind of a little bit in the future, maybe in our lifetime kind of a situation. So that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, it's a funny thing you mentioned that, because similarities are very, very alike. And you kind of hope, because you know how science imitates art, you kind of hope that the guys at, the people at Boston Robotics were not fan of RoboCop.
I think they were, actually.
I don't know.
Because the similarities are, they're pretty close, and that's usually what happens. I mean, look at when we talked in our episode, which by the way is our number one episode so far on season 1, the 2001 Space Odyssey. We had tablets. It's insane to look at that movie and how old that movie was, and seeing a tablet. It might not have an Apple in it logo on it, but it's a tablet.
Isn't that fascinating?
Hey, Robert, have you seen the design that Elon Musk has presented for his modular space station?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Very similar to the one in 2001, but modular. Like, seriously.
Damn.
Oh, wow.
Do they have
including the rotating part?
It's going to be Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos created an outworld that'll be exactly like Total Recall. Total Recall is just a glimpse at our future. Boom.
Yeah.
Hot take.
It's true, though. It's scary. Somebody showed me this Jeff Bezos TED Talk about how we'll put the poison manufacturing on these outworlds, and then there'll be people who work there while the Earth remains a beautiful, clean experience. I'm like,
uh-oh.
I was
bit
like,
late for that.
It's a bit late.
I don't know what to think about that. I had a question, and I wondered what would and I like to start with you guys. A podcast would never died, and love. I love saying that. Sorry, I'm not going to stop because I think
You can say it every episode.
Aaron, it was going to be Aaron and Kevin's homemade podcast, but Kevin rejected that idea.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever going to be that. I mean, that was a suggestion Aaron brought up.
I just love it. I just love that name. So the question that I had is, what was the most shocking scene to you in this movie? And let's start with you guys.
Oh, for sure, when they were killing Murphy, and it was just, yeah, chunks flying out. Oh, that was yeah.
It was
That's a big one. That's a big. I mean, that's a big one. And then, of course, the incredible melting man Emil dripping down the alleyway.
That didn't bother me at all. I was like, oh, another melty dude. It's like the Devil's Rain and all those old weird 70s movies. Everybody was melting from acid rain or whatever.
That's true.
That was a callback to the Toxic Avenger, apparently.
Yeah,
I could see it.
Yeah. Ray, do you have a favorite? Let's call it a favorite, because
well, I don't want to just agree with everyone else. So I'll say, "Can you fly, Bobby?" He gets shot in the leg, so they throw him at the police car. Yeah, why not?
And he's just dead. Did you notice that? It was like they threw him like 4 feet onto the back of the other car. So, and then he's just head slumps over, and then they roll his body. It's like, maybe he had a heart attack. I don't know what happened.
I think his head smashed into the windscreen. That was probably
that would do it. Yeah. Poor Bobby.
Yeah.
There were some great lines in this movie.
Yes.
Totally.
I was telling Kevin didn't get this, and I was surprised. Emil delivers this line, "Do you want to live forever?" Well, Emil was in Fame, which the opening song is "I want to live forever." So they were doing a little joke, because I was like, that's a dude from Fame, the old movie.
Wasn't that a Highlander reference also?
Whoa!
I don't know. It sounds very close.
It was a line in Conan the Barbarian.
Oh yeah.
And Basil Polodius did the music for this and Conan the Barbarian, so there's a link there as well.
Ooh.
Nice.
So do you think the Fame thing was just like a freak, like it was a coincidence? Or maybe they took it all into consideration?
Oh, I think there was a lot of Easter eggs.
Okay.
Oh, there absolutely is. It's funny because we're talking about how bloody and gory this movie is, but I mean, it's basically a comedy as well. I mean, they swirl all these things together.
It's
you
a
get whiplash.
comedy.
Well, it almost like it says, okay, I'm going to be a cop movie. Now I'm going to be a cyberpunk movie. Now I'm a parody. And I buy that for $1, and everybody's laughing at it like it's supposed to be funny. It's just,
it's a social commentary, as well. It's like he's covering all the bases. It's
a complex movie, which made me kind of turn my attitude around, because I was prepared to just hate this movie, because that's my memory. And actually, it's complex. The fact that they are watching TV and then there's this reoccurring character.
Well, I think MGM had a lot of
around.
I think MGM had a lot of confidence in this movie because it got 3 budget bumps. It originally started just over $13 million for budget. And then it got bumped another 600,000, and then when they were doing post, it got bumped again. So they kept giving them more money to get it right. I think that the executives really liked the direction it was going, and they must have thought it was on point.
You wonder how much of that would have to be, the merchandising, because the toys.
There was a cartoon. There was a RoboCop kids cartoon on Saturday mornings. Are you kidding me?
I remember.
There were bad parents in the 80s too, huh?
Hey, look, you two could have built yourself an Ed 209 for $25,000 back in the late 80s, apparently.
Oh, damn.
Drop in the
I
well.
think I was making $12 an hour. That might have been a stretch.
I mean, how does Ed 209 arrest anybody? At the end of the movie, he's going to shoot RoboCop for illegal parking. You've got 20 seconds to move your vehicle. Really?
That was part of the parody. It wasn't actually Ed 209 wasn't actually a police unit. It was actually a military unit that was being sort of introduced as a police unit and then was going to be sold to the military afterwards. It wasn't actually for policing.
Well, and Dick Jones says something to that effect. You know, who cares if it worked or not?
Yeah, he had
25 years in parts and upgrades.
It sounds such like a what you envision the car manufacturing business to be.
It's Detroit.
The 80s was the time when everybody was complaining. A hammer at NASA cost $700, if I recall.
It's still like that.
So there were all these complaints about all the military overspending and how everything costs 10 times more than. So yeah, right up the line.
The multi-million-dollar space pen that would work in space, whereas the just used a pencil.
That's what they did. In Russia, they just used pencils.
Yeah.
I remember that in the 80s, maybe the late 80s, early 90s, the space pen, every infomercial, get a space pen. They work upside down. How many times do you...
I just saw the Seinfeld episode where they discussed the space pen.
In case you're lying on your back.
Right.
Speaking of commercials, what about the commercials within the movie?
Oh. I was just telling my wife, these people, they probably had so much fun coming out.
Absolutely.
They were
Nuke
so out there.
Get them before they get you.
I remember the Cold War and how stressful it was thinking we were going to get nuked every second Sunday. And when I saw that, I'm like, they didn't go there. They seriously didn't.
You crossed my line of death. No more military aid.
Nuke them. Get them before they get you.
The funny thing is, I was watching this prior to for this episode, and I had the movie on, and I don't know exactly when, where my wife was, and she all of a sudden, comes out during all these, news articles, and she's watching, and she's confused, and she's looking at me and looking at the TV, and she's confused because it's just like
they blew up the airport at Acapulco. I was going there next week.
And I could tell in her face, she's like, okay, this is news, but it's old. So, and then it's like, I just looked at her, it's like RoboCop. And she said, oh, okay. And then she walks away.
Well, because the chick is a LA reporter.
Lisa Gibbons. She's on the news. Well, she's on Entertainment Tonight or whatever.
I was like, well, she was on the news. Now she's Entertainment Tonight.
You see where people get confused.
I just found that fascinating. She, it's like, and then she sat down and watched the rest of the movie with me. So,
no, I love the reporters, and I love the commercials, and I love fake Benny Hill.
Yep. The 6000 SUX because bigger is always better.
8.6 miles per gallon.
Miles per gallon. That's right.
And you'll get, we'll even throw it a black punt.
That's right.
I was writing that down because I had a car with a Blaupunk, and that was state of the art. You were rocking it if you had a Blaupunk in your car in the 80s.
Yeah, the hostage taker says, I want a car that goes really, really fast and gets really shitty gas mileage.
That's about right.
What about cruise control?
Yeah, cruise control.
There was a cartoon, like we have newspaper cartoons down here quite regularly, and they're very like parody and sending up the government and all this sort of stuff. You can get away with. We used to be able to get away with that down here. I don't think you can now. But there was one cartoon where this guy with his massive car was parked in front of the Bowser, and this was back when you could get somebody to fill your car for you, and the guy filling the car says, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind turning your engine off? I can't keep up with it." He couldn't pump gas fast enough to fill the tank because the engine was on.
That's how we did it.
It reminds me of the SUX.
That's 6,000.
That commercial with the dinosaur.
Oh yeah.
Yep. The claymation.
Yeah.
Oh, let's speak about the special effects for a while and all
yeah.
the stop motion and stuff with the Ed 2.
I love stop motion animation.
A lot of people complain about it, but it was part of the parody. It was actually part of the parody. They chose that deliberately and made it look clunky.
Well, I'll tell you, at the time, I thought it looked great. Back in '87, it looked, I mean, now you look back, I'll tell you what, my TV, it's like that, you have a high-def TV or 4K TV. All that, the crazy stop-motion stuff just looks looks lousy. I mean, it really stands out. Anything green screen really stands out.
Yeah, I remember watching this movie back then, and I always found it interesting that it looks kind of funky, but it looks good. You know, my brain wasn't processing this. Well, I was 17, so it's like a stop motion, and so I don't know. It's just I found it really interesting when I watched it for the first time.
Well, you can deal with it if you watch movies like Land of the Lost and all those sorts of
absolutely with
islands of dinosaur things, you know.
Right. Yeah, what is it? The Land That Time Forgot. Those kind of movies.
And the original King Kong and all that sort of thing.
Right. That's what we expect at the time. That was expected. That was how we did it back then. Now you try to show it to my kids. They're like, what in the hell is this?
Where's the lightsabers?
That's right.
Oh, man. So, yeah, this movie, going back to what we're talking about, I think my shocking part of this movie when they're shooting the executive,
Kenny,
he let go of the gun, but for this robot, he still had it, and they shot him. I always, after watching this movie as an adult, because I've seen this many times as an adult, I always wonder, because nowadays in special effects, you have those bags of blood with the they use detonator to explode, and they probably put a vest on them and stuff like that. I'm not too familiar how that was done in the 80s. I would like to assume that it was very similar, but so many of them,
it hurt.
It gotta hurt.
And it goes on and on. I mean, he's dead. He gets shot like 20 more times.
That's part of the parody. It's just everything's 11.
It was.
Blood.
And you gotta. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just kept thinking how expensive it is if they're going to use a rocket every time they want to shoot a bank robber or a jaywalker. It's like thousands of dollars because I'm going to use rockets.
That's true.
Oh my God! Yeah, it's
actually
really interesting to say
unguided
that.
rockets are cheap. The Russians were using it at the end of World War II. They're not that expensive.
But now,
it's all the guidance systems that make it expensive.
Now that she mentions that, it's like I visualized this and placed it in a real life scenario. You know the amount of money the government would have to pay every time they had someone go out and arrest someone?
Right.
You're not only taking out him, you're taking out anyone around him and any structures around him.
Well, those were micro rockets, so they weren't doing that much damage. But they were. They would have been armor piercing, so that's why they were using it against RoboCop, because he had the armor.
Well, okay, he's on like the third floor of the Omni Consumer Products building. I hope those armor-piercing bullets just fly off into space. Otherwise, there's going to be some collateral damage anyway, right?
Well, if you notice the scene where Kenny gets blasted onto the model of
Delta City,
Oh,
the
yeah,
city.
yeah.
There's glass right behind him and carpet and everything. They do a side shot and there's no damage. His body would not have stopped those shells. They were high velocity armor-piercing shells. But I just have to stop for a minute. After working in a university for 20 years, OCP doesn't know what work health and safety is. Why did they have live ammo in this thing?
I wrote that down too.
Demonstration.
And why was there a gun in the boardroom?
Yeah.
Well, that was for that was for the demonstration.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't surprise me if the board members walked in there open carrying. But to arm a prototype police robot with live ammo in a demonstration in a boardroom on that floor is just insane.
Right.
It's just, who would do that?
It makes you wonder if it's because of the the setting, where violence, if by watching this movie you realize the violence is very like commonplace. So is this something that has that is related to that? I'm stretching obviously, because there's no sense why you would, like, for a demonstration you want to do live ammunition, but I always wonder about that because of how the city, the death and destruction is commonplace.
Remember, Murphy is killed on his first day of work.
After transfer.
And then how many police are getting killed every day? It was like 30 officers a week or something.
They were going on a
we lost
strike
5 last week.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
But it is. But you got to also wonder about police procedure, because you've fought this gang in a car chase, car chase. There's at least 5 of them, right? So 2 officers go in and they split up so they can't cover each other. Hello?
Right.
You deserve to die if you do shit like that.
Well, they called for backup and they're like, sorry, backup's unavailable. You're on your own.
That's
pal.
because they're all dead.
Then I'll
Everybody
be backing up away from the bread truck.
That's right. You should have been backing up, as in leaving.
I love they couldn't catch up with the bread truck either. Because in the future, bread trucks are super powered.
Well, they threw Bobby through the windshield, so their vision was obscured. So it was like, okay.
Well, they found it, so they must have been able to follow it somehow.
Well, it's the one steel mill in old Detroit that all the action takes place.
All the criminals hide, apparently.
So we're chasing criminals. They're going towards the steel mill. What a shock.
I was thinking, what the heck? Were they going there? I mean, isn't this where Murphy died?
Nostalgia, right? There's a special place for Murphy.
Life-changing, you might say.
you might. Good times.
Nobody would give him a hand.
I still don't understand what part of Murphy is still there. Did they just take this much of the skin, they just pop his head off and stick it on a cyborg? Or is it more like the Borg? Are there other patches of him around? Or is it
he had a digestive system, so I'm suspecting that parts of his torso were still there.
So
but not his arm.
Food, it must be coming out somewhere. As soon as they showed that baby food, that was the first thought in my head.
We never really saw that chair.
That's right. It's a multi-purpose chair.
Well, it's not the same IP, but I can tell you that in the extra features of the Alita Battle Angel movie Blu-ray, they actually have a section on how cyborgs live, and they have a baggie that they can eat whatever they like and drink whatever they like, and they have a baggie that they've got to change out when it gets full.
I'm glad they didn't focus on that. We did notice that Dick Jones's digestive tract working great. He's in there in the stall when Bob is talking to another executive for far too long, I might add.
Well, it's a stressful environment, might back you up.
Can a man relax?
Yeah, he's testing his fiber,
That's right. He had a big lunch.
Bloody shark pool was that executive washroom.
It was beautiful. They washed their hands and everything. People were just hanging out in there. It's the place to be, evidently.
It's kind of funny how they come out with a executive card, to get into that bathroom.
Right. That is, when you're an executive of a certain level, then you can use it. Everybody else has to go down to the gas station on the corner, evidently.
I think this is an 80s thing with executive dining halls, executive washrooms, executive parking areas. Unlike, they don't want to have to mix with the riffraff.
Yeah, imagine if you were in a hurry and you couldn't find your executive suite card. It's like,
that would be rough sledding. You'd be begging for the bag at that point.
Now I'm wondering where it is, because he has that thigh that pops open and there's the gun. Maybe the bag's on the other leg.
I want to know. I want to know how his leg functions with that void in it for the pistol.
That's a good question as well. He has a crazy dead leg he drags around, evidently.
Well, when it got shut up, he was dragging it around. That's probably why.
I appreciate that when he gets stabbed later in the movie, he cries out in pain. Does that? I mean, are there pain? Isn't this just armor? Is there like pain sensors built in? That's fully functioning.
Presumably, there's somewhere in there that's got.
Yeah, I think it's biological, because at the end you can see him. There's bleeding, which brings another question too, because Lewis took him bleeding, right? You see the holes and you see the blood just coming out of the holes, which don't know.
I'm sure that wasn't Kestrel.
But
yeah, I thought it was oil or the antifreeze. I didn't take that as blood. I thought it was whatever is in his tubes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because it's like they went to this thing, where he died again. Apparently, he likes that place. And and next thing I see, he's just aligning his leg. It's like, hold on a second, what happened to the bullets? You definitely have holes.
That is true. Well, and I have to say, people recognized him remarkably easily. I mean, all you see is this much of his face. I mean, I guess because he twirls it like TJ Laser, then everybody's like, whoa, hang on. I know I worked with you for an hour and a half 6 months ago.
I know. Well, what up, Murph?
The guy who was robbing the gas station recognized him from Dead or Alive. You're coming with me.
Right.
He said the same thing to him.
It made a huge impression on him, even though we've established Emil has murdered 1,000 people since then. I kill a lot of people. I can't remember half of them.
Yeah.
But we had extra fun with him, so it was memorable.
Right.
Well, it makes you wonder too, like, because if you've seen that scene when prior to the death of Murphy, when he encounters that same guy, maybe it was shocking enough for him, because that moment, if something would have gone wrong, Murphy would have killed him. Because he killed the other guy, and he was he's like about to grab something, and he's just pointing at him, like, So it makes you wonder if that had an impression. But to your point, I agree. I mean, the guy kills every day, so it's like,
He was going to kill the gas station attendant for no reason. Think you can outsmart a bullet?
Apparently, he was smarter, and he got to prove it with a bullet. This, the movie was just plain fun. If I would have to put a label to it, and the one thing that came across, if I compare it to when I watched this when I was younger in comparison to now as an adult, it was just fun. And every time I watch it, that fun never goes away. And so I mean, I wonder what you guys, is there something else that you can add to fun on this movie? Or, and I can see, definitely I did not see the parody, but after Ray mentioned it, I'm like, I could see it all over the place now.
It pops in and out. 1 minute it's being serious, the next minute it's being tongue-in-cheek, and then bang, parody. It jumps back and forth, and that's part of the brilliance of the story. You never know what the scene is going to give you if you haven't seen it before, and the writing is really on point. Like movies like the original Ghostbusters, the writing is so on point, and it's so lean. There's no wasting time. It's only 102 minutes long, but there's so much packed into it. and the story is really well told. There's no wasted scenes. There's no sort of sitting around waiting for something to happen. It's like a roller coaster ride. You get on it and you go in until it's ended. There's no sitting around waiting for the fun. It's always, like monkeys at the zoo throwing poop. It's just always coming.
It's exactly like that. No question.
And we haven't talked really about Nancy Allen. I thought she was so sad. I love her popping her gum and stuff. I was obsessed with that. They're trying to make her not look sexy by giving her that crazy weird haircut. But at the same time, she's just snapping and popping that bubble gum. I don't know. I thought she was great.
And she's kicking ass. I mean,
when they introduced her, she was introduced by punching the shit. When you're finished playing with your perp there, come over here and meet your new partner.
That's how they do it, man. In old Detroit. Just duke it out.
Oh, yeah. I thought she was great.
I almost think they didn't give her enough to do, honestly. It's like, she's there. She meets Murphy. She's his partner for a few hours. She discovers that he's RoboCop, but she's gone for large swatches of this movie.
You kind of makes you wonder, was there like some draft where they had a romance or something? Because why is she there? Just because of her name? Because they really don't give her much to do.
I always wondered, which is not really expressed in the movie, but I always wonder if, the character thought in a sense it was her fault that Murphy died because he wasn't there to back him up. So now she feels guilty.
Oh, for sure.
And she's trying to be around.
Yeah.
It doesn't, they don't really express it. I mean, are you Murphy, with a very plain, you don't see emotion on that, but you kind of wonder, because I had the same question you did. Like, why she's always around. And that's the only thing that I can come up with.
She doesn't seem guilty. If this was a guy, if the Nancy Allen character was a guy, they would have him in a bar drinking. It's like there's 1,000 movies about cops who've lost their partners and then blame themselves. I just don't see that with her.
Yeah.
Because they weren't together long enough.
She's over it pretty quickly.
Bond, yeah.
She gets a new partner. Well, I guess, again, in old Detroit, cops are getting killed by the bushel. So it's hard to get attached to anybody.
The fact that you live long enough to get your monthly paycheck is a bonus.
Absolutely.
You made it all the way to payday.
Wow.
And yet, because this is years later, right? What was this? 3 years later? Was it? What was the time between when he was shot and when she sees
No.
him?
No. It was like a couple months, because they said that they were supposed to get Delta City up and running in 6 months.
I don't know why.
We can bring RoboCop. We can bring RoboCop to prototype in 90 days. So it's 3 months.
So spending a few hours with him, it's because of those little heart-shaped lips. She was able to then immediately figure out that the giant robot, even though I've never seen one before in my entire life, has to be Murphy. Boom.
Right. Well, and I have this question, and maybe you guys know the answer. Why was Dick Jones working with Clarence Boddicker? Ooh.
Well, I have a tendency of stretching things. I definitely see a benefit for Boddicker. And I'm struggling to see what was maybe as a higher muscle. Whenever he needs something done, like he might need to get these people out of the building because he's constructing this. So I know I might be stretching it.
I'd say that Dick Jones didn't care how things were done as long as they were done, and having an enforcer on the wrong side of the law was just easy for him.
But he's welcomed him into the new city that he's creating to fill it full of crime and drugs, and people will.
Because good business is where you find it.
Is where you find it.
This is OCP. Omni consumer products. That means everything, including hookers and drugs. Hookers and below.
Somebody made the point that they needed Clarence Boddicker to basically wreck old Detroit to make it such a shithole that the police were basically sold off to Omni's consumer products in order to kind of take over. Like they needed it to get there.
I get that part.
You don't say that. They don't say that, but
then why bring them over to your new utopia? Because there's new Detroit that's already there at the architect?
Because there's always going to be somebody running scams and hookers and drugs and everything into wherever you are. They want to control everything, so they want to control that as well.
That's true.
You control everything all the way up. And
it's going to happen. It's going to happen regardless. We might as well take control of it.
So you own the cops, you own the criminals, you own the place, you own everything. You are Omni consumer product.
That in my mind, that sounds like a horror movie.
Right.
Because
I believe dystopia
kind of
was
power?
I believe dystopia was the third word used in the description of the movie. So yeah.
It is horrible to think that, they pretty much got free range if it wasn't for Murphy. Mm-hmm. They control the police, they control the criminals.
Well, strong section.
It's the 80s, so it's like we don't trust corporations. We all got rich and then it got all taken away.
The strong vibe of cyberpunk is that corporations control everything.
Yeah.
And that is very clearly seen in the setup of this movie.
Oh, yeah. They do.
We need more cyberpunk. we do. I love it so much. We should have like an Alita TV show so we can get a lot.
Oh, people have been suggesting that for D+. Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, this movie it brings all kinds of emotions, when I saw it for the first time. And I don't know if I feel good or bad for like part 2, part 3, and all the other stuff that came out.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what happened to The Matrix. The first RoboCop movie was perfect. The first Matrix movie was perfect. And then it fell off a cliff. But,
I kind of like RoboCop 2. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's not Lawrence of Arabia, but I still think it's fun. 3 is unwatchable. And the remake is, of course, an abomination.
I'm gonna be honest here. I watch it for nostalgia reasons.
I did too,
but that's it.
I know. Ruined my memories. It's very upsetting.
And I have never seen any of the remakes.
My attitude was like when Peter Weller said no gracias, then I was out. I was out.
Because he says yes to everything? Is that what you're implying?
I was talking about Peter Weller the other day, and it was kind of like, oh, he's like, staple of my childhood. And then I go back, oh, he was in Buckaroo Banzai and he was in RoboCop.
That is the staple of your childhood.
That's it.
I hate Buckaroo Banzai so much.
Deep Star 5 as well?
He was in Leviathan, which was similar to Deep Star 6.
Star Trek.
Deep Star 6. There you go.
There was a lot of kind of crazy shit happen on the bottom of the ocean movies that came out about that time. So,
well, yeah, I agree with you.
We talked about that the other day.
I'm sorry?
We were talking about that the other day. My theory on it was how you get a script going around the studios and they're not picking it up, but they like the idea, so they get someone else to write it for them for cheap. And then by the time the original script comes out, you have 2 or 3 copycats that come out around the same time.
That's absolutely right.
So Leviathan, Deep Star 6, and there was another one.
The Abyss.
The Abyss, I couldn't forget that one. Cameron, yeah. So I'd say The Abyss was the first one, and the other 2 were copycats that were produced around the same time to try and get in on the idea and pick up some of the fans. Like fans will go see The Abyss and go, oh, that was cool. I want some more, deep sea nastiness. Oh, here you go. Here's 2 more. Oh, cool. Okay, I'll go watch those 2.
Well, and Roger Corman did Lords of the Deep, starring Priscilla Barnes from Three's Company. So you also have to include that in the mix, obviously. Wah wah.
I love how they do, like, sometimes it didn't happen that much that I can think of, but when they get an idea and they went ahead and did two separate movies about the same topic with a different spin. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Armageddon versus Deep Impact.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that was another one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, Dante's Peak and Volcano. I mean, they were. It's the weirdest thing. White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen. They still do it. It's the weirdest thing, and they're always released within like a couple months of each other.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that wait a year, but they seem to come out around the same time. So it's like competing against each other. Why?
It absolutely is.
And at least the ones that I seen, they're both good. And like, for example, and Ray knows me more. I mean, by now, I would prefer Armageddon because it was a lot. Although it was still emotional, but I prefer it over Deep Impact because I'm an empath, so I feel less on that than I feel on the other. So I don't know. I mean,
Armageddon's much more fun.
Yes,
it's much more fun, and again, if I'm watching a movie called Armageddon, I'm not expecting Shakespeare. Okay, I get it. So just make it fun. Let the journey be an enjoyable journey at that stage of the game, and it is. I enjoy it. It's fun.
Well,
you
I'm expecting
to
Disney
accept
ending.
that when you go to the theater. Just let it wash over you.
Luxuriate.
Luxuriate in what is Armageddon.
I believe the technical term is suspension of disbelief.
Yep. And you really got to suspend it.
Yeah, off an asteroid, apparently.
That's exactly right.
Oh man, the movie was just plain fun, and I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it just like you said. Part 2 was good also, but that would be the extent. I mean, I watched all of them. Don't get me wrong.
I did too.
But if it's 1 and 2, and 1 holds a special place in my heart, and I think the what was his name? Peter.
You're talking about RoboCop, the actor?
Yeah,
Peter Weller.
Peter Weller, yeah, and he was definitely an icon of the 80s.
That's what I thought, but he wasn't in that much that was knocking my socks off.
For some reason,
Buckaroo Banzai loop, Kevin. That's all it is. The 80s just was Buckaroo Banzai.
That is true.
Exactly.
Adventures across the 8th dimension, I think
it's called The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension. All-star cast. You got Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Lloyd. You got John Lithgow.
Really long people.
But that has a big following. It has a big following. I think it's the roles that he played and not how many roles he played that made him an icon of the 80s. Because I even now I seen him pop up in different properties. One of the most surprising ones that I saw was in Star Trek. I was like, hold on a second, that's RoboCop, and I got emotional. But
which Star Trek?
What's that one?
See, that's the thing. Peter Weller is RoboCop, so every time you see him, you go, "That's RoboCop." Who's the actor? I don't know, but that's RoboCop.
For me, he's RoboCop.
Yeah,
that Star Trek movie. It was the new, with the Kelvin timeline.
Yes.
I believe.
Oh, it's in the new world. It wasn't like Search for.
No. This is the Kelvin timeline. Which, by the way, I had an issue at the beginning, and now I'm okay. I can take the Kelvin now.
Is that the current timeline? Is that the current?
That's version? The J.J. Abrams timeline, basically, is what we're talking about.
The lens flare timeline, as I like to call it.
I enjoyed the first one. It took me a minute to appreciate it, but I enjoyed the first of the new Star Treks. But you're right, they had to do something like that. Otherwise, am I just recreating the same old stuff? Am I telling the same old stories?
Yeah.
But then they do it anyway. Khan's in the second movie. It's good grief. Spoiler alert.
Which reminds me, put that on the list. We have to do the original Rathacon.
We do. That's a good one.
That's already been done on Science Fiction Remnant. I was so depressed that I wasn't there for that one. That was so good. that movie blew me away.
Yeah, you might not want to listen to that one before you do your episode, so you don't get influenced by our.
There you go. There you go.
Listen to it after.
There you go.
I'm going to listen to it first and just steal everything you said and pretend like it just popped out of my head.
Copious notes. Absolutely.
To fill you in on Peter Weller in Star Trek, he was actually in Enterprise as well.
He was. 2 episodes.
He was Admiral Alexander Marcus in Into Darkness, and he was John Frederick Paxton in Enterprise in the fourth season.
That's the Scott Bakula Star Trek.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that one. But I am pro Star Trek over Star Wars.
Okay.
Everybody goes quiet because they don't want the fight to start.
I don't care.
The bomb just dropped.
Say Jean-Luc Picard was the best captain, so boom.
Mic drop.
Definitely the best actor. Speaking of Shatner, how did we not talk about TJ Laser, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
True. TJ Laser.
Good times.
Oh my god. Yeah, this is so much fun. I think we just talked everything that we can talk about this movie.
I was going to say that Peter Weller was so fresh-faced when he did RoboCop. Like, he walks into the station and he looks like he's walked straight out of Beverly Hills 90210.
Oh, yeah.
With the haircut and the face. And obviously, he's been working in a sort of upmarket residential sort of suburb.
Yeah.
And nothing ever happens there. Like, you know, the worst that they have to do is like admonish a few kids for, you know, like spraying paint on a wall or something like that. You know,
rescuing a cat from a tree.
Yeah,
or
cats
something.
out of the trees. Yeah, that's that. Cats out of trees, we call that Tuesday. But I think he had it pretty easy, and he wanted to go somewhere where there was a bit more action.
Right,
and he
big
didn't realize
mistake.
He was going to the war zone, but
Reed even says, "We work for a living here, Murphy."
And what was the other guy? The other guy said, "Welcome to hell."
Yeah, go get your armor. It's like, okay.
The worst times to join the police force are your first day and a day before your last day. Those are the 2
getting
times
too old for this shit.
Yeah.
2 days to retirement.
I love those movies.
With the sad saxophone. Yeah.
Awesome. So I don't know if you want to move to the next our last segment.
Let's do it.
Go ahead.
There's no more last words about what was RoboCop.
Sure.
I've got something. Back in the early 90s when RoboCop became syndicated to TV in Australia, they were very strict about the amount of violence you could show on television. So I remember when RoboCop first came to television, this is free to air, and I was watching it on, you know, your classic CRT 480p screen, you know, with really bad resolution. And they had to cut that scene where he got shot up so much that it was like the guy standing there going boom, 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 and then you have a quick flash to the guy, and then boom, 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 quick flash to the guy. You wouldn't actually see anything hitting him. He's just like, it was almost a freeze frame because they had to cut so much out of it, and the audio was chunky, and the music was broken up. It's just the worst edit job you've ever seen. But they had to leave that scene in because it was pivotal. But it was so violent. They were trying to edit it. It was just a mess.
There were a bunch of movies that I saw the first time when they aired on regular TV back in the 80s. And then later you see it, you know, the uncut version, you're just like falling out of your chair with all the F-bombs, with the nudity. Right. You're like,
only
what?
seen The Exorcist edited on TV, and the first time I read it, I was like, what the hell? I don't remember any of this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, at least the person who edited RoboCop understood that you couldn't just take the entire scene out that was pivotal. I have seen movies that just made no sense whatsoever when it was on live to air TV because they went, "Oh no, that scene's too graphic. We'll take that one out." It's like, what? Where did the woman go? She just vanished. She's not in the.
I remember something else happening there.
And you can't follow it.
Even if it's not violence and gore, look what happens. At least here in the U.S., I don't know if I was in Australia when Blade Runner first came out to the theaters. A lot of people were scratching their heads. It's like, what did I just watch? It made absolutely no sense because they cut so much of the movie, and then that's why they came out and released the final cut or the director's cut, and then like, oh, so that's what it means, and that's why the director cut sold so many copies because now people really liked it and this became a but I hate when they do that when they actually cut. I'm sorry,
I don't like the director's cut. I like the voiceover at the beginning.
Yeah, the whole gumshoe monologues in the original theatrical version was my favorite part of it.
Absolutely.
And I
know
suspect
people
that they
hate it, but
I suspect that they put that in because they expected it to get cut, so they had to explain what was going on for the bits that were missing.
Yes,
and it still didn't work.
But it reminded me of old film noir that the detective would always be a voiceover at the beginning.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Sam Spade, blah, 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 blah.
Well, it had a whole detective vibe in the original theatrical, which was just lost in the later versions.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I find the director's cut kind of long and plotting.
Yeah.
So.
And I love Blade Runner. But there's been like 3 edits of it. I think there's the theatrical release. There was the director's cut, and then there was some other cut.
The ultimate, probably.
But I can't remember the other one. But I remember going to the theater for the director's cut. So they cut out the monologue at the beginning, and then they just added just a lot of extended flyover scenes.
I can remember that. I'm familiar with the third one. I think I've seen them all, but I can't remember right now what was called.
No, I can't remember it. The editor's cut or something.
some other cut.
The executive producer's cut.
That's right.
The janitor's cut.
D Grips cut.
The Easy DVD cut.
I would watch the janitor's cut.
Well, you see, he swept up all the bits off the floor of the cutting room. So you see, his cut would have everything.
That's right.
That could be a really cool horror movie. Okay, so I guess final thoughts on the movie.
Hang on. Before we move on, I've just Googled for the win. There are apparently 7 different cuts of Blade Runner.
Oh, wow. I'm only remembering 3.
Do they have titles?
Work print, US theatrical, international, director's cut, final cut, 30th anniversary collector's edition releases, San Diego sneak preview cut. It just goes on and on and on.
Do they have it for Myers cut?
That's right. The director's cut and the final cut. That's what I remember.
I remember that too.
So yeah, there's working prototype version in 82. Yeah, so there's 7 different versions of it.
Wow.
Not all of them were released though.
Thankfully.
It is one of my favorite movies. And the book is so completely different.
Oh yeah. So I don't know, Ray, you want to give us your final thoughts on the movie or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a seminal cyberpunk movie. It's a lot different from a lot of cyberpunk in that it's really grounded in the time. Like it's obviously an 80s movie, and they're not saying 20 years in the future this happens. No, it's now, and we have cyborgs and big companies that want to control everything. They just basically said, oh, those cyberpunk tropes, they're great. Let's just shove them straight into Detroit right now. Bang. and so they did. And it was very interesting because a lot of people can really relate to, you know, the late Cold War ads that were being shown and all that sort of feeling of the future now, with like the ad for the artificial hearts. And
Yamaha.
and yeah, we have the whole Yamaha series. And it's like and then at the very end he stops and looks back and goes, we care. You know, that whole
as an afterthought.
Yeah, exactly. Tacked on at the end as an afterthought, trying to make it sound like we give a shit about you, but no, we just want your money. And that's like the subtext. And it's brilliant in the way that it's cyberpunk. It's modern day dystopia. It's parody. It's comedy. It's got all these things combined together that shouldn't work, and it just does work. And it's also ultra violent. So, you know, it's got all of these facets that you wouldn't think work well together, and it just did. And that's what makes it such an amazing movie.
Awesome. I guess the next would be you guys. I don't know which of you want to go first.
I will. I will say that I did have a turnaround. It's still not my favorite movie. But I did have a radical kind of turnaround because I just watched it again last week, and it is much better than I remember. And I don't remember any of the humor, but now I see it all. So I mean, if you haven't seen it in a long time, I would recommend you check it out.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a seminal late 80s science fiction action movie. I think it is dynamite. Peter Weller, his physicalization as RoboCop is really outstanding. I mean, it is amazing. I mean, he's very much like segmented the way he walks and does all those things.
We didn't even talk about the robot doing the robot.
He did the robot. He's in that dance club doing his thing. The social commentary is there, which I appreciate now much more than I did as a 12-year-old or however I was back in the day. But if you haven't seen this, I would definitely say check it out. It's not fun for the whole family.
No,
don't invite the clergy. Don't invite grandma to sit down and watch it with you. But for people of a certain age, I think it is excellent. Check it out.
If your grandma open carry, she probably will like it. But otherwise,
know your grandma, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to say that Peter Weller went through hell to portray RoboCop. Apparently that suit was really, really hot. And he would sweat. Now, where was it? He would sweat out 1.4 kilograms of fluid a day, which is, how many pounds is that?
And he was as thin as a razor blade then.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. There wasn't enough of him to milk in that fashion.
Yeah,
I heard
that was sweat too.
Yeah,
I heard he didn't fit in the car. So all the scenes, which is kind of interesting now that I rewatched after I heard this, all the scenes where he get in and out of the car, he's on his underwear. So if you look at that scene, there's always like from the stomach up. They never show you, and it makes sense. I mean, that's the first thing that I remember, watching it as a young kid is like, okay, how does he fit in the car?
And they insisted he wear underwear. That was a bone of contention.
But that is a cut I would love to see.
I'm sure Peter Weller had something to put the underwear over, but I don't think RoboCop did.
So
and could we mention his gun for a minute? I don't think he reloaded it until the middle of the second movie. I think an amazing clip on it.
It's endless supply.
Unless there was an autoloader in his leg, which then goes to say, well, how did the leg work if it had that huge void and an autoloader in it? But anyway.
Right, if your entire leg is hollow, that's hard sledding engineerically speaking.
You got a point there.
Well, the only thing that confused me is when bad people shot him at the beginning when he first became RoboCop, it had no effect. But when cops shoot him, then suddenly he's
Right.
dying. That
I
was a little
suspect
confusing.
that the SWAT units had armor-piercing rounds, whereas the bad guys didn't. Which made
You know,
it
my
more-
wife has the same question too when they were shooting. But the first thing that came to mind was like, hold on a second. This is an army. They're all shooting at the same time. They are going to do something. You know, before it was just, a couple of guys, maybe 15, but this is like, 20 or more shooting all at the same time. So I don't know if I'm stretching it again, but it kind of makes sense in my head.
Don't ask too many questions is the moral of the story.
Awesome.
So he was sweating 3 pounds of fluid a day.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
A lot of Gatorade.
It was like Karen Carpenter by the time they were done shooting.
Oh no.
And it also said here he began taking prescription medication to cope with the stress-induced insomnia, which left him filming scenes while intoxicated.
Oh Lord!
So he
Whoa.
went through hell to be RoboCop.
Sweet Jesus.
Wow. He
Yeah,
deserved the
hopefully he's
role.
not one of these bitter celebrities. I was typecast. I could have done Shakespeare, but now all they want is RoboCop. Let's hope
That's
it
what
didn't
Picard
go
said.
that way.
But I suspect that's why he decided not to do the later movies, because he had enough.
He
Yeah.
thought there were going to be bigger, better things around the corner.
Yeah, I'll
Or
just go down to the
Peter
bottom of
Weller.
the ocean and get bitten by things instead. Had a rough life, that guy.
Yeah.
It's a hard
yeah.
knock life.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, and I always think that, typecasting in a way is one of the worst things that could happen to an actor, because it kind of cuts on your workflow, if I imagine. I mean, I don't know anyone that is an actor. I can only imagine this, but, you know, how hard would it be to go and audition for a role, and the people that are looking at you auditioning for a particular role, they look at you and they just see RoboCop. It's like, no, we'll call you. Thank you.
Well,
They only see RoboCop because really that was the last big good thing he did. I mean, if he was like a Nick Cage where he's just throwing crap out every 2 years, you get confused that he won an Academy Award, right? Because you just only remember the last thing, because there's so much going out. With Peter Weller, what do you really remember him doing after RoboCop? So that's always just going to be in your mind, like Shatner.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he was T.J. Hooker, but come on.
that's correct. The
And
thing
he's
about
Captain
this
Kirk.
stuff, the thing about this stuff is being an actor is hard. I mean, you complain about being typecast, presupposing that all the other, amazing roles were going to be pouring through your door. I mean, who's to say that's what would have happened? You know what I mean? It's like, I appreciate the idea of I don't want to play the same role over and over again, but at the same time, be thankful people are putting you in anything.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
I
It's
suspect
true.
there are very
Hollywood's
few.
not knocking on my door.
I suspect there are very few A-list actors who can turn stuff down, pick and choose.
Right.
Everyone else is just taking what they get.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And I guess my final thought on the movie is the movie was just, and I mentioned this before, the movie was just fun. It was a lot of fun, especially at a time when I have the hunger. I always had the hunger for sci-fi, and
I thought about my jam movie, The Hunger. You had a hunger for sci-fi. Never mind.
I have I always had the hunger for sci-fi. I mean, if you listen to our previous episode on Logan's Run, that's basically when it started. I was 6 years old when I watched this movie and I was completely hooked. But in my journey through sci-fi, I discovered other subgenres like cyberpunk, which is something that I wish there was more of. And in my hunger for cyberpunk is what actually made me watch this movie. And although gore wasn't my thing, I appreciate it in this movie. It makes it, if you want to say, maybe I'm stretching here, but a little bit more realistic for the type of scenery they're trying to paint. But you can't go wrong. Sci-fi, cyberpunk, action movie. That this the RoboCop is. Version one was just a lot of fun to see all those things work together. Just like Great say, things that don't normally work together work so well together. And this is the memory that I happily discover that is still true today when I watch this movie after being an adult. Granted, I there's a lot there's a lot more things that I notice now that I did not notice when I was younger. But that pure fun factor, that pure sci-fi cyberpunk action movie factor is still there, and it was I'm very happy that that I got to see it, and I want to see more of this. So that's basically just my final thought.
Well, there's 2 sequels and a kid show. See, there was more.
And a remake.
Yeah. We won't talk about that.
Well,
The remake that shall not be named.
that same hunger made me watch all of those. Everything RoboCop I watched.
Yeah.
I refuse to talk about it, but yes. Awesome. Ray, are we ready?
No, but do it anyway.
Okay, here we go.
The science in sci-fi.
Okay.
Okay, so science and sci-fi this week's a little bit tricky because there wasn't a whole lot of science in this. I mean, you had commercials for ranges of artificial hearts, of which they were expecting in the late 80s for them to really take off, but they haven't as such. And most of that's due to the body rejecting something artificial, being in such an important place in the body. But what I wanted to focus on today was the now is it Boston Robotics that did the dog?
Yeah, I thought so.
I believe that's correct.
I think it is Boston Robotics, but yeah, Boston Dynamics. There we go. Yeah,
Dynamics.
Dynamics.
Yes, but Boston Dynamics, besides doing the walking robot, they have these dog-shaped robots that are missing a head, so they look a little bit weird. But police departments were trialing these throughout the US in 2021. And there's actually a New York Times article here. NYPD robot dogs run is cut short after fierce backlash. So let's just say that the public didn't take well to these things. And you could imagine that the parts of RoboCop where the OCP and the police force turn on RoboCop is very similar to these reactions of, you've got this new thing, this prototype that they're trialing, and there's a backlash because I haven't actually read the whole of this, but I suspect it wasn't the police that were backlashing against us, probably the public.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in the news.
Yeah, but I mean, people want the future, but they don't.
They don't want that future. Yeah.
They can't deal with it. Basically, I mean,
they want the Jetson cars. They don't want robot police coming to get you.
where are my flying cars and hoverboards? That's what I want to know. It's supposed to be 2016.
Kind of future we can get behind.
Yeah, but So I wonder if the guys at Boston Dynamics saw RoboCop and went, "Hey, we can make our own little Ed 209. We won't put the guns on it because that didn't work out so well. But he's a robot to assist in. And I mean, they've been using robots in bomb disposal and stuff like that for decades now. But these self-actualizing robots that are really good at balancing and hunting things down and stuff like that, people get scared of them. Because they've watched too much sci-fi probably, but where that all goes wrong. But so here's an example of where robots are becoming used in police activities, much like the plan was for the Ed 209, although that was complete overkill. But and the public is not dealing so well with it. So that was my first example. Do you guys have any comments on that one?
Well,
No, you're right on.
I was going to say, I wonder if that has anything to do with the thought of the conversation that they're having, like, for example, around drones, military drones. There's talk about having autonomous drones going on missions and shooting. That's already a bad thing. That's an example of a 209. But even if you don't have the AI and the devices, and you have people controlling them and viewing remotely, that even that brought some ethical questions.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter how you look at it. I wonder if that has anything to do with what we're talking about and what we have seen in the news, where that robot dog was being used in New York, because that brings a lot of good questions. Who chooses, and and do you as a human, like, there's two topics here: the AI choosing who dies and who lives, right? That's one thing. And then the other thing is, even if you have a human deciding on the other end who chooses who dies or who lives, how does that desensitizes you being from afar? Because there's a difference when
Right.
you're a soldier, you're face to face, you're looking at the barrel of the other gun, and you got to react to that. You're sitting down in a comfortable place. And granted, I'm not taking away the fact this is very stressful, and you probably need to go through a lot of therapy when you have that job. But I like to think there's a level of this sensitization when you're on that type of job, because you're not facing the danger.
Becomes
So
a
Wasn't
video
the
game.
yeah wasn't the army like recruiting video game players to control these things, and they were considered too desensitized to be able to make snap decisions about morally, gray subjects and issues.
that is the worst thing, I can speak as a gamer. That is the worst thing that they can do, because the reason why we play those kind of games is because we know it's safe. We know we do, at least speaking from my
Nobody
perspective,
dies.
no one, even though I should, no one dies from my actions, and I will not die from their actions.
Right.
So, I can only speak, based on my experience, but I like to think that some level of that has to go in when you hire a gamer. And that's a bad idea in my book.
Yeah, I mean, something to be said. If you're going to kill someone, you should be at least able to look at them.
Yeah.
We go from a context of this is just a game and it has no relevance, it's just a bit of fun, to this is reality and people's lives are at stake, and can the drone controller make that switch?
Right.
Yeah.
But you see, everybody complains about the drones until they deliver your pizza, and then it's all good.
Oh yeah.
So all you need to do is have the military drones deliver pizzas, and everybody will be happy with it.
I would support that, no question.
I'm game.
Okay, so the other subject I wanted to bring up was the rising development of artificial limbs. Obviously, RoboCop had artificial legs and arms. We know that they saved one of his arms. They said, no, we'll get rid of it because we want him to have arms that are both super strong. So I just wanted to bring up somebody that I've actually interviewed on Radio Chaos, Tilly Lockie, who is an advocate of artificial limb replacement over in the UK. She lost both her forearms to, I think it was encephalitis or meningococcal, one or the other. But anyway, she has two artificial robotic arms, and obviously they're not to the same level as RoboCop in the movie. But just the fact that these sorts of things are being developed now, and obviously the technology is improving from what used to be, like a thing that would just, pick two sort of pseudo fingers that could pick up stuff, to whole hands that she can control with just minor muscle movements in her upper arm to manipulate things. She can pick stuff up. She can, pour a glass of water and drink it and do all that sort of stuff. So it is coming along. It's not there yet, but even the small steps that have been taken at the moment are changing lives and improving lives for amputees. In fact, the Elite Army is just about to deliver an artificial arm to a recipient who couldn't otherwise afford one, in a charity that we organized. We raised about $18,000 US from our members in the Elite Army, and that covers the arm fittings, adjustings as the child grows, and all of the training and everything that they need to integrate that arm into their life. So we feel
Good
pretty
for
proud
you.
of
That's
that one.
amazing.
Yeah, that's great. I always thought the potential that technology has for people like that. It saddens me that there's always going to be that potential for like the militarization of that technology, But what I envision is, like, let's just give you an example that I painted. And there's another podcast that I talked to, Out of the Blank, with Rob. And we're talking about this, where I said, imagine someone that loses their feet, right? And the technology, the way that science fiction paints it, which is a great example of the positive thing of science, is this person would be able to go back and feel the sand in their feet, the warmth of the sun. And this is something that nowadays you can't. But I think about all those the possibility of enhancement, and when you turn the corner, there's always someone who wants to make money. They're going to make it military, and okay, so now they're going to have guns, and they're going to have this, and they're going to have that, and the more I think about it, the more I get sad. I always want to see that goes to the people that really need it. I don't know if you guys agree with what I'm saying, but it's money talks, unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might have a really good intention, but if you don't have the funding, you can't get that done. And where you get the funding is whoever pays for that project.
Right.
And unfortunately, you can't be choosy if it's a military or some other entity that want to use this for something completely different than what you had it planned for.
Right.
Well, it's another sort of corollary to that, in that the sector of employment that has the most people with amputations is the military. So if they were to spend some of their massive budget of weaponry budget on artificial limb replacement and improving those for the people who've fought for your country and then suffered a loss of a limb or multiple limbs, to improve their lives again, I think that would be a great way to pay back the people who've protected the country.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. Awesome. So,
But not if it's to build more RoboCops.
Got to draw the line somewhere.
what was that? The death line? No more for you?
No more military aid.
Awesome. This is the portion of the podcast where I come out and say thank you. It was, I can't speak for Ray, but it was really fun to have you guys here. And sorry, I have to say it again. The podcast.
Yeah, you can speak for me because it's okay.
The podcast that never dies. I think it's the greatest name ever, and the podcast is amazing. If you guys have not listened to it, you should go ahead and listen to it.
Not that we never die, it's that we won't die.
You won't die. The podcast that wouldn't die.
So rather than dying, you'll just turn into zombies and keep going. So
That's correct. Well, eventually, Catherine Deneuve throws you in a crate in the attic. That's a hunger reference.
We're going with the hunger. Yeah, you're alive, but you're like a potato chip somewhere in someone's attic in Paris.
Just keep the microphone. That's all I'm asking. So again, if you go ahead and speak of what your podcast is about and where they can find you for all our listeners that are listening to this podcast.
We are the podcast that wouldn't die, and each week we discuss horror and science fiction, usually wacky ones that were somehow very important to us when we were younger.
You can find us on Twitter at TPodcastTWDie. We're on Facebook at The Podcast That Wouldn't Die. We are on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts and anywhere the finer podcasts are available. So check us out.
Awesome.
I intend to do that.
I'm
a big fan of both sci-fi and horror. In fact, I write sci-fi and horror. So,
oh, very cool.
Yes.
In fact, Doc Joe, who was on the podcast, was it last week? It's a bit hard to tell with the order that things have been going. But a previous podcast, the Logan's Run one, we had Doc Joe Sweeney on, who is a independent tabletop role-playing game publisher. And I work with him. We have a game called Rapture, The End of Days, which is theological sci-fi horror. So I think it ticks all the boxes for you guys.
Dynamite.
Yo, if you throw a little Catholicism in there, then it's whammo.
Nice. Again, thank you so much for coming on our show. I hope that you come back soon. We had a lot of fun. And like I said, I cannot speak for Ray, but I had a lot of fun.
I can't speak for Aaron.
You think I'm going to sit here and go, no, I didn't enjoy that.
Why do we have those people on our show again? I told you not to get them on.
I have to disagree with you there. I mean,
And I know Giancarlo's is, he was going to be very sorry he missed this. But I hope that you guys can come back for another episode.
Absolutely.
If we can coordinate our schedules again, and we can talk, and hopefully Giancarlo's will be on that one.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And to you listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode. And I hope to see you guys again. Thank you. And that's a wrap. Let me go ahead and cut the video.
Yay!
Beautiful.